They say a family's home is their sanctuary, a safe haven, the one place in this world where peace should never be disturbed. But for the Henderson family, their dream home became the stage for a nightmare. And it all began with something as simple as grass. You might think it sounds ridiculous. Grass? Just blades of green on the ground. Harmless, ordinary, forgettable. But for the Hendersons, their lawn was not just grass. It was a weapon, a trap, and ultimately, the spark that set fire to their lives. This is the story of the grass that ruined a family. When Michael and Sarah Henderson first moved into the quiet, gated community of Willow Creek Estates, they believed they had finally made it. Michael had just secured a management role at a finance firm. Sarah, a talented teacher, had landed a position at the nearby elementary school. Their two children, Emily and Jacob, were thrilled to finally have their own rooms, a backyard to play in, and a neighborhood that seemed, on the surface, picture perfect. It was the kind of neighborhood you see in glossy brochures. Neatly lined houses, driveways without a crack, mailboxes standing at perfect attention, and lawns that looked like emerald carpets rolled out by hand. To the Hendersons, this was the American dream. But in Willow Creek Estates, dreams came with rules. Rules etched in thick, legal documents handed to every homeowner. Rules enforced with an iron fist by the HOA, the Homeowners Association. At first, life was calm. The Henderson kids made friends. Sarah loved walking to the park. Michael took pride in mowing his lawn on Saturdays. But just 3 months in, an envelope arrived, a letter, stamped with the Willow Creek HOA insignia. Michael unfolded it, expecting a simple notice about community events. Instead, he froze. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Henderson, your lawn has been found non-compliant with Section 4.2 of the Willow Creek Landscaping Guidelines. The grass must be maintained in a shade consistent with approved community standards. Please reseed or repaint within 14 days, or fines will be issued." Michael stared at the words, confused. Reseed or repaint? Repaint? "The grass is green," he muttered. Sarah leaned over his shoulder. "This is insane. Our lawn looks fine. Better than fine. It looks like every other one on this street." But the HOA didn't think so, and they weren't about to let it slide. Michael shrugged it off at first. He figured it was a clerical error. He even laughed about it with Sarah. But exactly 14 days later, another envelope arrived. This one carried a fine, $200. Michael stormed into the kitchen, waving the letter. "They fined us $200 because our grass isn't the approved shade of green? What the hell does that even mean?" Sarah bit her lip. "Should we just pay it? Maybe it'll make them leave us alone." Michael shook his head. "No, that's exactly how they win. If we give in now, what's next? They'll be measuring the angle of our blinds or the shine on our mailbox." It was the first crack in their peaceful life. The Hendersons had unknowingly entered a battle they never asked for, a battle they were about to lose, piece by piece. Soon, neighbors began whispering. Some avoided eye contact. Others gave sympathetic smiles. One old man across the street, Mr. Cooper, leaned in one evening as Michael wheeled his trash bin out. "Careful, son," he said in a low voice. "The HOA has been doing this for years. First it's the grass, then it's something else. They test you, push you, until you either bend or break." Michael frowned. Why doesn't anyone fight back? Mr. Cooper's eyes darkened. "Because those who did aren't here anymore." The words lingered in the air like a curse. Weeks turned into months, and the letters didn't stop. Each one brought new demands. Receive an approved type of grass, repaint patches that look too dull, or else pay escalating fines. The Hendersons tried everything. Fertilizer, new seed, expensive treatments. But the HOA always found something wrong. And every time Michael thought he had solved the problem, another envelope arrived, another fine stacked onto the pile. The stress began to seep into the Henderson home. Dinner conversations turned into arguments. Emily and Jacob overheard the fights and grew anxious. Sarah, once full of warmth, now spent nights silently staring at bills. Michael grew angrier by the day, snapping at small things. The grass outside looked flawless to the naked eye, but inside the house, everything was withering. Then came the breaking point. One Saturday morning, Michael woke up to the sound of engines. He looked outside and froze. A landscaping crew, hired by the HOA, was ripping up his front yard. Every blade of grass, every root, stripped from soil like it was contaminated. Michael ran outside in fury. "What are you doing to my yard?" he shouted. The foreman calmly replied, "Orders from the HOA. Your lawn was in violation. They're replacing it with turf." Turf! Michael's voice cracked with rage. "I never authorized this. This is my property." But it didn't matter. The HOA had authority. Or at least they believed they did. Sarah came out, tears streaming down her face as she held the latest letter. "Michael, they billed us for this. $5,000. The Hendersons stood frozen as their once lush yard was destroyed before their eyes. And that was the day the war truly began. The Hendersons thought this was just about grass. But what they didn't know was that beneath the surface, far darker forces were at play. Neighbors had vanished, homes had been seized, and the HOA's control was deeper than anyone could imagine. The grass was only the beginning. The night after the turf was installed, Michael stood in his driveway, staring at the plastic blades of fake grass glowing eerily under the streetlights. It looked too perfect, so uniform, so unnatural. His yard had been stolen, and with it, a piece of his dignity. Sarah came outside, wrapping her robe tighter against the chill. "Come inside, Michael. Please. You've been out here for hours." But Michael didn't move. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched. They think they can control us. Like we're just tenants in their little kingdom. But this is my home. My land. I'm not bowing down. That was the first time Sarah saw the fire in his eyes. And it scared her. The next morning, as Michael walked his car, a woman from 2 streets over approached him. Her name was Linda Avery, and she carried a folder under her arm. "You don't know me," she began, glancing around nervously. "But I know what they've done to you. It happened to me, too." Michael frowned. "The HOA?" Linda nodded. "They fined me until I couldn't keep up. Claimed my shutters weren't the right shade. I lost my savings fighting them. And then my house." Her voice trembled. "They foreclosed, Michael. They can do it. They will do it." She handed him the folder. Inside were copies of legal filings, letters, and records of fines that seemed eerily familiar. "Why are you giving this to me?" Michael asked. "Because," Linda whispered, "you still have a chance. But if you don't act fast, you'll lose everything." Before Michael could respond, Linda turned and hurried away, as though afraid someone had seen her. That night, Michael shared the folder with Sarah. The documents painted a horrifying picture. Multiple families fined into bankruptcy, homes seized under the guise of community enforcement. Sarah's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. "Michael, they've done this before. To so many people. We're next." Michael slammed his fist on the table. "Not if I stop them." Sarah looked up sharply. "Stop them? How? You're one man against a board of lawyers and rules." Michael leaned in, his voice low. "Then I won't fight them with rules. I'll fight them with truth. If we expose what they're doing, the whole system crumbles." But someone else had noticed Michael's defiance. The very next day, another envelope appeared. But this one wasn't like the others. Inside, written in cold, typewritten words, was a message. "Cease your actions. Non-compliance will result in consequences beyond your control." Sarah read it aloud, her face pale. This isn't about grass anymore, Michael. They're threatening us." Michael crumpled the letter in his fist. "Let them come. I won't be silenced." But deep down, even he felt a tremor of fear. Word spread quickly. Some neighbors supported the Hendersons quietly, offering sympathetic nods or whispered words of encouragement. Others avoided them completely, afraid of being associated with the troublemakers. At a neighborhood barbecue, Michael overheard 2 men talking. They should have just repainted the grass like everyone else. "Yeah, why fight it? The HOA keeps this place perfect. We don't need rebels." Michael realizing that the HOA didn't just rule through fines. They ruled through fear, through conformity, through neighbors turning on neighbors. The next week brought chaos. First, Michael's car was mysteriously towed from his own driveway, with notice claiming it was parked at an improper angle. Then, Sarah received a violation letter for improper curtain color in the upstairs bedroom, curtains she had bought from the community-approved store. Each violation carried new fines. $200 here, $500 there. Within a month, their balance had ballooned to $8,000. Sarah broke down one night at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. "We can't keep this up, Michael. We'll lose the house. We'll lose everything." Michael wrapped his arms around her, though his own chest ached with fear. "I'll fix this. I promise." But promises don't pay bills. Desperate for answers, Michael reached out to Linda Avery again. She led him to a dimly lit cafe on the edge of town, where a small group of former residents gathered. They called themselves the Dispossessed. Each one had the same story: unreasonable fines, escalating harassment, and eventually foreclosure. Some had lost homes. Some had lost marriages. A few, Linda whispered, had even lost their lives under stress. "They want control," one man growled. "It's not about the grass. It's about power. They profit from it. Every foreclosure, every lien, it feeds the system." Michael listened, his fists tightening. The HOA wasn't just strict. It was predatory, organized, calculated. And unless he stopped them, his family would be next. That night, Michael returned home with a new determination. He wasn't just defending his lawn anymore. He was defending his family, his home, and the truth. He set up cameras around his property. He began recording every violation, every letter, every encounter. And slowly, he started to notice patterns. Strange inconsistencies in the rules, selective enforcement. Neighbors spared from punishment while others were targeted. The HOA wasn't enforcing rules. They were picking victims. But the deeper Michael dug, the more dangerous it became. It happened at 2 a.m. Michael woke to a noise downstairs. A faint shuffle, a creak on the floorboards. He grabbed a baseball bat and crept down the hall, his heart pounding. In the living room, the curtains swayed as though someone had just slipped out the window. On the coffee table lay a single envelope. No stamp, no address, just 2 words scrawled in black ink. "Last chance." Michael's blood ran cold. He looked up at the window, the plastic blades of turf shimmering under the moonlight like a silent warning. And in that moment, he realized this wasn't just about rules or fines anymore. This was war. The Hendersons had lost their peace. They had lost their safety. And now, they were dangerously close to losing their home. But Michael had uncovered something far bigger than his family's fight. The HOA's power ran deeper than anyone could imagine, and the cost of defiance might be more than he was willing to pay. For weeks after the break-in, the Henderson home felt different. Windows stayed locked, curtains drawn. Every creak in the night sent Sarah jolting upright, her breath caught in her throat. Emily, only 12, stopped sleeping in her room altogether. She dragged her blanket into the living room every night and curled up on the couch. Jacob, just 8, asked questions Sarah couldn't answer. "Mom, why do they hate us? Did we do something wrong?" Sarah tried to reassure him, but inside, her heart was breaking. It wasn't just fines anymore. It was psychological warfare. And Michael, he was consumed. He worked by day, but by night, he pored over documents, recordings, and meeting minutes. His obsession with bringing down the HOA grew so strong. Sarah barely recognized him. The man who once laughed with their children in the yard now barely looked up from his laptop. Michael knew that if he wanted answers, he needed to confront the head of the beast. The HOA president was a man named Richard Hallstrom, a retired attorney with a spotless reputation. Hallstrom was both respected and feared in Willow Creek Estates. He lived in the biggest house, with the greenest lawn, and seemed untouchable. Michael attended the next HOA board meeting, held in the pristine community center. Residents sat politely, sipping coffee, while Hallstrom presided at the head of the table with a smile that never reached his eyes. When Michael raised his hand to speak, the room fell silent. "My family has been harassed for months," he said, his voice firm. "We've been fined, threatened, and violated. This board is abusing its power, and I won't stand by any more." Halstrom's smile widened, but his eyes sharpened like glass. "Mr. Henderson," he said smoothly, "your family's noncompliance is well documented. Our community thrives because of rules. Without them, there is chaos." Michael leaned forward. "No, without rules, there is freedom. What you're running here isn't order. It's tyranny." Gasps rippled through the audience. Halstrom didn't flinch. "Order, Mr. Henderson," he replied calmly, "is the price of beauty, and beauty is what keeps this community alive." Michael left the meeting boiling with rage. He hadn't just faced a man, he had faced a king sitting on his throne. The very next morning, Sarah opened the mail and nearly collapsed. "Michael," she cried, holding up the letter, "they've placed a lien on our home." The paper explained it in cold legal terms. The HOA fines, now over $20,000, were enforceable through property seizure if unpaid. Michael's stomach churned. They were losing. No matter how hard he fought, the HOA was always one step ahead. But he refused to give up. Late one night, while combing through HOA records he had secretly copied from public archive, Michael stumbled across something strange, a folder labeled Acquisitions. Inside were detailed logs of homes foreclosed by the HOA over the past decade. Dates, addresses, valuations, and, most shocking of all, the buyers. Nearly every seized property had been purchased by a shell company, and all those companies led back to one name, Richard Halstrom. Michael's hands shook. The HOA president wasn't just enforcing rules. He was profiting off of people's misery, destroying families, seizing homes, flipping them for personal gain. And the Hendersons were next on his list. Michael rushed to tell Sarah. He poured out everything, the acquisitions, the pattern, Halstrom's scheme. Sarah's face went pale. "Michael, this is dangerous. If you go after him, he won't just fine us. He'll ruin us. Or worse." Michael grabbed her hand. "Don't you see? This is bigger than us. If we don't stop him, how many more families will be destroyed?" But Sarah pulled her hand away, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't care about the others right now. I care about Emily, about Jacob, about keeping them safe. I can't lose this house. I can't lose us." For the first time, Michael saw not just fear in her eyes, but doubt. And that doubt grew darker when, 2 days later, he discovered something devastating. On his desk lay a letter from the HOA. But this one wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to Sarah. She had quietly agreed to meet with the board, negotiating compliance in exchange for reducing family strain. Michael's chest tightened as he realized his own wife was breaking. She was ready to surrender. That evening, they sat in the kitchen, the silence so heavy it was suffocating. "You went to them?" Michael whispered, his voice trembling with both anger and hurt. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I had to. You're consumed by this fight, Michael. You're risking everything. We can't keep living like this. The kids are scared. I'm scared. If bowing to them means saving our family, then maybe that's what we need to do." Michael's fists clenched on the table. "If we bow now, we lose anyway. Don't you get it? They'll never stop until they own us completely." But Sarah shook her head, her voice breaking. "I'd rather live on my knees than watch you drag us all into ruin." The words cut deeper than any fine, any threat. Michael felt the ground shift beneath him. He was no longer just fighting the HOA. He was fighting to keep his family together. 2 nights later, the war turned violent. Michael returned home late from work to find his camera smashed, wires torn out, lenses shattered. The turf lawn had been vandalized, coated in some kind of chemical that burned his nostrils as he approached. And nailed to the front door was a single wooden board, carved with crude letters. "Stop, or next time it's not the grass." Sarah clutched the children, sobbing as Michael ripped the sign down. His fury boiled over. "This ends now," he growled. Determined to strike back, Michael arranged another secret meeting with Linda Avery and the dispossessed. They gathered in a dim basement, their faces grim, their voices hushed. But as Michael laid out his findings about Halstrom, he noticed something strange. Linda wouldn't meet his eyes. "Michael," she said softly, "you've done well, Maybe too well. Confusion flickered in his mind. What do you mean? Before he could react, two men from the group stepped forward, blocking the exit. And then Linda's expression changed, from fear to something colder. Hallstrom knows, she said. He knows everything you've uncovered. And he knows you won't stop. So he made me an offer. My debt erased. My slate wiped clean. Michael's blood ran cold. She had betrayed him. Linda leaned closer, her whisper sharp as a knife. You should have just paid the fines, Michael. Now it's too late. Michael was trapped, betrayed by the very people he thought were allies. The HOA's reach was deeper than he imagined. And now, the fight was no longer about his lawn or even his house. It was about survival. The grass had ruined his peace. The HOA had ruined his family. And soon they might ruin his life. The basement was silent except for the sound of Michael's own breathing, ragged and uneven. Two men stood like shadows at the door, blocking his only escape. Linda's face, once a mask of fear, was now carved with something colder, resignation. Hallstrom told me you wouldn't stop, she whispered. I begged him to let me handle it my way. He agreed, as long as I delivered you. Michael's chest tightened. Betrayal burned deeper than any threat. So you sold me out, he said, voice shaking with fury. Linda's lips trembled, but she didn't deny it. I couldn't lose everything again. You'll understand when it's your turn. Michael's fists clenched. No, I'll never understand monsters. The men advanced. But Michael wasn't about to surrender. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, he swung a folding chair into the nearest attacker, the metal crashing against bone. The second lunge, but Michael ducked low, barreling into his ribs. The fight was messy, desperate, fueled by rage and survival. Somehow, Michael broke through, stumbling into the night, breathless and bloodied. And in that moment, he made a choice. He wasn't going to hide. He wasn't going to beg. He was going to burn the HOA to the ground. Back at home, Michael gathered everything. Files, photos, videos, the acquisition records tying Hallstrom to the foreclosures. Sarah stood in the doorway, pale and trembling. Michael, what happened to you? He looked up at her, his eyes blazing. It doesn't matter. What matters is this. He held up the folder. Proof. Enough to bury Hallstrom. But Sarah's fear deepened. And what if it buries us instead? What if they come for Emily and Jacob next? Michael's voice softened for the first time in weeks. He cupped her face in his hands. Then we fight together, or we lose everything apart. For a long moment, Sarah stared into his eyes. And then, slowly, she nodded. The Hendersons would fight. Michael knew he couldn't trust the HOA's own channels. He needed exposure, something public undeniable. So, at the next community-wide HOA meeting, Michael arrived early, a small USB drive in his pocket. On it, every document, every video, every proof of Hallstrom's empire built on stolen homes. The room filled with residents. Some smiled politely, others avoided his gaze. And then Hallstrom entered, calm as ever, his smile as sharp as a blade. Order, he called, rapping the gavel. Tonight's agenda. Michael stood, cutting him off. No agenda. Tonight, we talk about the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Hallstrom's smile didn't falter. Mr. Henderson, you are out of order. Michael strode to the front, plugging his USB into projector. Within seconds, the screen lit up with damning evidence. Foreclosure lists, shell companies, bank transfers, all leading back to Richard Hallstrom. Murmurs filled the room. Faces turned pale. Some residents gasped in horror. Michael's voice rang out. This man isn't protecting our community. He's destroying families, stealing homes, lining his pockets with your misery. Hallstrom's mask cracked for the first time. Hallstrom slammed the gavel, his composure slipping. Lies! Fabrications from a bitter man who cannot follow rules. But Michael wasn't backing down. Then explain this, he said, pulling out a contract with Hallstrom's signature. Explain why every foreclosed house was funneled into your hands. Explain the missing funds. Explain the lives ruined. Residents began shouting. Is this true? You stole my sister's house. We trusted you." The room dissolved into chaos. Halstrom pounded the gavel, but his authority was crumbling. Finally, his voice rose, raw and venomous. "You think you've won, Henderson? You think you can fight me? This community exists because of me. Without me, it falls apart. You need me." Michael's reply cut through the noise like a blade. "No, we don't need tyrants. We need freedom." In the chaos, Michael's evidence spread like wildfire. Residents pulled out phones, recording everything. Within minutes, the story was live, shared, posted, unstoppable. Halstrom's allies turned pale, whispering nervously. For the first time, the board looked divided. And then, in a moment that sealed his fate, Halstrom lost control. He lunged at Michael. The crowd gasped as the HOA president, once untouchable, revealed his true self. Michael sidestepped, Halstrom stumbling forward, his mask completely shattered. "Look at him." Michael shouted, "This is your leader. This is the man you trusted." And just like that, Halstrom's reign ended. The fallout was immediate. Police were called. Investigations launched. Within days, Halstrom was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. The community fractured, but the spell of fear was broken. Residents began speaking up, sharing their own stories. The web of silence unraveled. For the Hendersons, it was a bittersweet victory. The liens were lifted, the fines erased. Their home was safe, at least for now, but the scars ran deep. Emily still woke in the night, trembling from nightmares. Jacob still asked why grown-ups could be so cruel. Sarah still carried the memory of betrayal, both from Halstrom and from herself. And Michael, though victorious, knew something had changed forever. He had stared into the abyss of power, and had stared back. Weeks later, Michael stood once more on his lawn. The turf had been removed, real grass receded. Tiny green shoots pushed stubbornly through the soil. It wasn't perfect. It was patchy, uneven, vulnerable, but it was alive. Sarah joined him, sliding her hand into his. The children laughed somewhere behind them, their voices carrying on the evening air. Michael's voice was quiet but steady. It was never about the grass. It was about control, and we took it back. Sarah rested her head against his shoulder. "Do you think it's over?" Michael looked out across Willow Creek Estates. Still beautiful, still deceptive, but no longer invincible. "No," he said softly, "it's never really over. But as long as we stand together, they'll never ruin us again." The camera would fade, pulling back slowly until the Henderson house became just one among many. Its grass greener than most, but never perfect. Because perfection always comes at a cost. This was the story of a family who refused to bend. A family who fought not just for their home, but for their freedom. The HOA thought it was about grass. But the truth is, it was always about power. And sometimes, it only takes one family to tear down an empire. The fallout rippled far beyond Willow Creek Estates. Local newspapers splashed headlines across their front pages. HOA president arrested in fraud scandal. Families exploited by corrupt association. Small-town homeowners exposed multi-million-dollar scheme. Soon, national outlets picked it up. The Henderson family story spread across talk shows, podcasts, investigative programs. Michael found himself at the center of a storm he had never asked for. But the strangest thing? People were grateful. Letters poured in, emails from strangers across the country, families who had battled their own HOAs, veterans who had lost homes to predatory fines, single mothers who had been bullied into foreclosure. The Hendersons had become a symbol, not a rebellion against rules, but a resistance against tyranny. Yet inside their own home, things were not so simple. Emily no longer bounced onto the lawn with the carefree joy she once had. She would sit on the porch steps, watching her brother play, her small hands twisting together. "Daddy," she whispered one evening, "will they come back for us?" Michael knelt, pulling her close. "Not anymore, sweetheart. They can't hurt us now." But inside, he wasn't sure if that was true. Corruption had many faces, and fear had a long memory. Sarah tried to return life to normal, packing school lunches, baking bread, trimming roses. But sometimes, in quiet moments, Michael caught her staring at the grass with an unreadable look, as if still hearing the echo of Hallstrom's voice. The victory had saved their home, but it had cost them peace. At the next community meeting, under new leadership, the atmosphere was different, gone with the smug smiles and sharp glares. Residents spoke in halting, nervous voices. Some apologized. Others admitted they had been afraid. Too afraid to speak until Michael forced the truth into the light. One older man, tears in his eyes, approached Michael. "I wanted to help, but I was terrified of losing my home. You stood up when the rest of us couldn't." Michael shook his head. "I didn't stand up for courage. I stood up because I had no choice." And that, perhaps, was the truest lesson. Heroes are rarely born from desire. They are forged from desperation. Spring arrived. On the Hendersons' lawn, fragile blades of real grass pushed higher, weaving into patches of stubborn green. It wasn't perfect. Some spots remained bare. Others grew uneven. But Michael would water it each morning, watching as the lawn, slowly, stubbornly, came back to life. Emily and Jacob began to laugh again, chasing each other through the uneven patches. Their joy was uneven like the grass, but it was returning. And sometimes Michael would catch Sarah smiling again, not the tight, weary smile she had worn during the battle, but something softer, something alive. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Sarah joined Michael in the yard. "You know," she said, running her hand across the imperfect grass, "we could have moved. We could have walked away." Michael nodded slowly. "We could have. But then what? They would have done it to someone else. Maybe worse. Maybe to our kids when they grew up." Sarah's eyes softened. "So all of this, was it worth it?" Michael looked at the lawn, at his children, at the home he had nearly lost. "It wasn't about the grass," he said. "It was about proving we belong here. That no one gets to decide our worth. Not a man in a suit. Not an association. No one. The Hendersons' lawn was never the greenest. It was never flawless. But it was theirs. And in its uneven, imperfect beauty, it carried a truth stronger than any rule or regulation. A family is not measured by the shade of its grass. It is measured by its roots. Roots strong enough to withstand the storm. Roots deep enough to defy the hand that tries to rip them out. And sometimes it is those roots that ruin the empire built to control them. Because in the end, it wasn't the grass that ruined a family. It was the grass that revealed their strength.